One of the greatest flaws, I guess, or one of the greatest places of disobedience in the church today is the commandment that Jesus said, go out and make disciples of every nation. Now, I want you to notice here, he didn't say go out and make converts. He didn't say go out and pray with people the sinner's prayer, even though that's a good start. He said, go out and make disciples. And starting here in verse number 9 of Philippians, the 4th chapter, the Apostle Paul shares with us 4 elements to discipleship. Now you might be thinking, well, that's for the pastor of the church. No, that's for you. Jesus didn't say pastors go out and make disciples. He said to all of his disciples, he said, you go out and make disciples in every nation. It's your job. It's my job. It's our job as believers, not just to make converts, but to make disciples. And I'm going to share with you from the teaching of the Apostle Paul to the church at Philippi 4 elements that make up discipleship. What's the first one? Well, let's go to verse number 9, chapter 4, verse number 9 of the book of Philippians. The things that you have learned. The things that you have learned. Simply, these are the things that you have sat under teaching, maybe much like the teaching I'm doing, the teaching in your church. By the way, if you're not part of a local church, get in a local church that teaches the Word of God. Teachings that you might hear on the internet, teachings that you might view on television. He's talking about the things that you have learned. And now this word learned, it brings in the connotation of a formal education. In other words, things that you have taken and you've studied, you've looked at, you've been taught. He says, the things that you have learned, the things that you have applied yourself to learning. Maybe it's a tape series. Maybe it's just studying a book of the Bible like we're doing here. But the things that you have learned. And then he adds to that. And by the way, every discipleship experience should be an experience where someone teaches someone else. You see, the word disciple actually means a follower. How many of you realize you can't follow unless you've been instructed? You can't do something unless you've received instruction. And that's a very, very important part of making a disciple. And then he goes on and he says, the things that you have received. Now this word, received, it actually means to receive by association. To receive by association. To receive through the way of osmosis. Let me just say something to you, and you need to realize this, something that's very, very important. Churches have a spiritual atmosphere or climate. Every church has a spiritual atmosphere or climate. Some churches, the spiritual atmosphere actually is going to draw you away from God in your relationship. They're going to preach a loose gospel, a gospel that's really not the gospel at all. Other churches, they're strong in the Word. They preach the Word of God. They teach the fundamentals of the Word of God. And so the Apostle Paul says the things that you've received. Now he's talking about that you've received from me, that you've received from Timothy, that you received from Epaphroditus. These things, the things that you've received, part of discipleship is just basically being around a person, because you will actually soak in their morals, their ideas. The book of 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, verse 33 says, do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good morals. You know what? Good company causes you to have good morals. Instead of corrupting it and destroying it, it causes you to have good morals. So in other words, watch the place that you go to church. Watch the people that you associate with, because you're going to begin to draw in from them whatever spirit they're operating in. I believe in this thing called the transference of spirits. I believe that, the Apostle Paul says, watch out in the laying on of hands in the book of 2 Timothy. Why? Because spiritual things can be transferred from one person to another. And so, let me just say this, your fellowship that you have with other believers is so important, because just hanging out with them causes you to become a good disciple. Now let's go on. The things that you have heard. Now this means that the things that you've listened to intently, that you give audience to. Let me ask you a question. How many hours a day do you spend watching unrighteous stuff on TV? You know what? You're hearing stuff. It's coming in the ear gate and it's going to the heart. It's going into the mind. What are you listening to? Many years ago, I stopped listening to secular music. Why? Because I realized that music was something that was coming into my ears that was affecting my relationship with God. What are you listening to? What are you giving ear to? What are you giving audience to? Beware of what you're listening to. And then the third element of discipleship, and by the way, let's go back to the third one. What you're listening to. Part of discipling is just listening to the person who's mentoring you. Just sitting there and listening to what they're talking about. Listening intently, giving audience, not just hearing it, but giving audience to what they're saying to you. I thank God for the men in my life, my spiritual fathers, that mentored me, that told me and taught me, and not only taught me, but showed me what to do. And that brings us to the last point, the fourth point. And the things that you have seen. The things that you have seen. The Greek word for seen is the Greek word eido, and it's another word that's used for knowledge or for understanding, but it means to know by experience. You know what? If you're mentoring someone, which is your job to do as a believer, you know what? You're causing them to become a disciple. You need to take them with you and let them see you do things. They need to see you in your home. They need to see you in your business. They need to see you when you're ministering to someone, when you're laying hands, when you've gone out to pray for someone. Take them along with you, because they need to see you minister. The Apostle Paul says, practice these things. Do these things. In other words, the things that you have learned, the things that you've received, the things that you've heard, he says, practice these things. And then he says, and the peace of God will be with you. You know what? We live in a society that's very anxious. It's a lack of peace. I believe one of the reasons why we live in such an anxious society is because we as believers have not seriously taken the instruction of making disciples. Wow, think about that. Thank you for joining us today. God bless you.